views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to reporters and editors and writers and videographers and filmmakers and anybody who's putting stuff out in the borough of the Bronx. And this evening, we're going to be joined by a top flight reporter, a tech and policy reporter for City and State New York. And in our second segment, you're going to love it, the best artists and the best photographers in the Bronx. There's a new film, and we're going to present a little clip, and you're going to find out all about that. But let's get started with Annie McDonough, who is, as I said, the tech and policy reporter for City and State New York. Nice to have you with us, Annie. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I've got the print publication in front of me. What's next for police reform? My goodness, what a question. Annie took a swat at it, and we appreciate your getting into that. Let's get started, though, just real briefly, so people who know who you are. How did you get into reporting and journalism, and how did you find your way to City and State?
I got into reporting and journalism in high school, fell in love with it there, and I actually got into City and State as an intern. Started out as an intern a few years ago, and when a job opened up as a tech reporter here, I very, very happily applied for it, and things worked out very well.
That's a nice clue to my interns, Jalen and Christine, to tell them, hey, you know, this is kind of how it works. One thing we do want to know, where were you? Where did you grow up? Where did you live? Where did you go to that high school? Yeah. And then we'll put you here in the borough of the Bronx.
I'm from Delaware originally, so not too far away, but certainly very different from New York and very different from New York City. Went to college upstate near Utica, a place called Colgate University in Hamilton, New York, and have been in New York City since graduation.
And here you are. All right, let's roll up our sleeves and get to it. The Rochester police force was under significant pressure after the shooting of Daniel Prude. They have, and I'm pulling it right out of your article, the Person in Crisis Program and the Forensic Intervention Team. In cases of potential mental illness, those teams are supposed to be called in. Is this an effective way of kind of revising how we handle our police responses to cases with mental illness, and will it keep people safer? Sure, answer that one.
It's a big question. I think it's a start. Daniel Prude died of suffocation. He was experiencing a mental health crisis during the interaction with cops. I think for a lot of people who watched that happen, it was just another case of a failure of officers to adequately respond to someone in a mental health crisis. Rochester, the city, has set up since then the new team you mentioned, the Person in Crisis team. It's a crisis intervention counselor and a social worker who are sent in to respond to mental health calls instead of the police. I say it's a start because it's a pilot program. It's about 16 people now. I think they have plans to expand to 30 or so later this month. So, it's a start. There are flaws in the program that many people have pointed out, but it's part of a larger trend, I think, that we're seeing to start happening around the state, certainly in New York City as well, in terms of our police, the right people to respond to these calls, and should they be removed from the equation entirely?
One of the questions, and I don't really want to spend a lot of time on it because it's being debated probably in every municipality, is how is it paid for? And then if you're going to take that money from traditional police budgets, then of course people are saying, well, now you're defunding the police. On the other hand, it's got to be paid for. It may be a significant piece to proper policing. What are your thoughts? I mean, and how is Rochester paying for it, for example?
Rochester has devoted about $600,000 to it, and the city budget process is happening in later this spring, early summer. And I think we've seen some hints that they will expand the program. There's certainly interest among the city council in expanding the pilot program. But for one example, to answer your question, to take things to New York City a little bit, Diane Morales, one of the Democratic mayoral candidates, has suggested funding a separate city agency of, by and large, mental health professionals to respond to these kinds of calls instead of the police. And that would be funded directly through cuts to the NYPD. That's been her suggestion. Other plans from candidates we haven't seen in quite as much detail. I think that's an open question of how it would be funded. But certainly it's part of the defund or reduction of the budget debate.
Yeah, it's definitely in the middle of it. There's a thing, and you reported, which really is a startling statistic, and that is that people with mental illness are 16 times more likely to get shot in police interactions. That would sound the alarm to me. There's a program that you reported on also called, and I want to get it right, HEARD, right? The BHEARD, the Behavioral Health Emergency Assistance Response Division. The thing that bothers me, I like it because I think it's a good idea and we've got to address this problem. But the thing that bothers me about it is another agency, another bureaucratic thing. And one of the issues with Daniel Prude, as I understand, and you reported, is that program did not kick in because of the way the dispatchers described it in the 911 call, and they weren't aware that it was about a stolen car, and they weren't aware that it was for a mental health program. A problem that's an issue. I mean, we've all got to speak the same language,
right? And so you're talking about the PIC team, the person in crisis team, PIC
Yes.
team for short. A lot of acronyms in this space, but that was set up earlier this year after Daniel Prude, but it was not dispatched in the case of a 9-year-old girl who was experiencing a mental health crisis.
Oh, that's right. That I mixed them up.
But there
were
right
so
on,
many. There were so many. How could you keep track?
But all those details you mentioned are absolutely correct. It wasn't dispatched because the original call to 911 in which this girl was involved was about a stolen car. And once on the scene, officers, for one reason or another, didn't call on the new resources available to them, and the girl was handcuffed and pepper sprayed.
To me, the conclusion of your article was exactly what I think this dialogue is going toward. And that is a couple of legislators are now talking about making it a state program, because otherwise Buffalo, let's talk cities, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, New York City are going to have to create their own programs, and everybody's going to have, a different way of handling it and a different set of, budgetary considerations, or everybody's going to be speaking a different language. This seems to me to be the way to do this, right? To get our arms around it.
Yeah, I mean, the phrase you use, speaking the same language, is obviously really important here. You can't have sort of crossed wires when it's something as monumental as responding to mental health calls. And yes, the legislation you're speaking about is called Daniel's Law, named after Daniel Prude, sponsored by 2 legislators from the Rochester area. It would basically set in motion a statewide reform process. Regional councils will be set up to decide how best to approach different parts of the state, different cities, but the idea would be on a statewide basis, starting to divert these calls, mental health calls, substance use calls, homelessness calls away from the police.
Yeah, one way or the other. And then again, we're going back in circles. You need to, how's it going to get funded, et cetera. Only have a couple of minutes left, but you talked about, you wrote about this idea of vaccine passports, so that if you're vaccinated, you have it's part of your passport, and then you can be verified in any number of ways and qualify for, certain things. But of course, there are many people who say, hey, if I don't want to take the vaccine, why should I be, persecuted against or not have other opportunities other people have? What are your thoughts on that, and where do you think this is headed?
So New York had to sort of be first out of the gate on this. We were the first state to launch a vaccine passport app, like what you're talking about. They call it Excelsior Pass. It's a bit of a misnomer because you can generate this passport. It's a QR code. And if you're going into a concert venue, a baseball stadium, any businesses that signed on to use this, they'll scan it and say, you've been vaccinated, come on in. It will also accept a recent negative COVID test result though. So it's not just vaccinations, but it's absolutely correct that there's a ton of apprehension around this because of civil liberties, things like if I choose not to get vaccinated, maybe I have antibodies, should I not be let into this business? But it's also because of privacy and concerns about equity and vaccination distribution not being equitable quite yet. So it's raised all these concerns. But
so I guess the answer to my question of where's this going, we don't know. I mean, this could go all the way to the Supreme Court. I mean, that would, in other words, the controversy is that large.
I think, and I think the question is how widely we see it adopted, because right now it's just places like Madison Square Garden, these big venues. I think if we start to see smaller businesses and restaurants sign on to this, if they're asking for your vaccine passport or other proof of vaccination, which they're also required to accept, to enter a grocery store, I think you're going to see a larger outcry and controversy over this. There are also those who think it's a great idea, though.
Well, right now, for example, both Yankee Stadium and Citi Field, you've got to show proof, but that's a private enterprise. I realize there's a public nature to it, but it's a private enterprise, and if they believe that they want to, protect their situation and also certainly their clients, then they're I presumably legally entitled to do that. Anyway, Annie McDonough, it is just a pleasure to have you for the first time on the Bronx Buzz, and I'm guessing that this will be the first of many, and I hope that's true.
Thanks so much for having me. I'd love to come back.
Great. Annie McDonough from City and State New York. When we come back, you know what? I got the book here. I'm going to show you this book. We're going to show Annie the book too. This is the Bronx documentary, Bronx Artist. I'm hiding behind it. The Bronx Artist documentary project. One of the most exciting artistic projects, is not only a project and a book, now it's a film. We'll be right back with that. Don't go away.
Who's most at risk for coronavirus? People over 65, people with underlying medical conditions like heart disease, chronic lung disease, asthma, diabetes, people undergoing cancer treatment, and people with weakened immune systems. What should you do if you or a loved one is at higher risk? Avoid close contact with people. Avoid crowds. Stay home if you can. Wash your hands frequently. Learn more ways to protect yourself and others at coronavirus.gov.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
We know that people are dealing with the health crisis, but there's also a lot of food insecurity.
We're giving out healthy food options, and that's what's key here.
If you're a senior, you have a disability, they'll actually deliver meals to you.
The residents are anxious, they're worried, they're scared, they want to be tested.
When things were happening in our community and we couldn't get the help.
There's almost a presumption
of criminality that attaches to your skin color.
The site will prioritize those who are at highest risk in the population.
If you feel symptoms and you'd like to visit one of these COVID-19 testing sites here in the Bronx, you may call the State Health Department's hotline.
Important to note about this site is no reservations are needed. This is a walk-in clinic.
A lot of us are out of work and looking for something to do.
We have the machinery and the skills to make large scales of these masks and gowns.
Take care of your people. It's going to go way further than we actually can understand.
Right now, employees like myself are just adjusting
to the new reality.
Reporting from BxADP, this is Judith Lane.
Okie dokie, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. And this is the book. It is the Bronx Artist. I got to move out of the way. The Bronx Artist documentary project. This was, to my mind, one of the most exciting Bronx Artist projects to come down the pike really at any time. And we have Dan Hauben and Judith Lane. They put it all together actually a few years ago now. So let's start with you, Judy, and tell us, first of all, welcome to the program, and tell us what this was. What is the Bronx Artist documentary project?
Well, that, Gary, was a project that we thought up in 2013. My husband, Danny, got this idea originally to make paintings in the studios of Bronx Artists to show them at work, how they made their work, what they were making, because visual artists don't get to be seen, you know. And then he realized that setting up his studio in an artist space setting up your easel was just not possible. There's no room. And so it evolved into a photography project. It became a project that was borough-wide. We had 30 Bronx photographers documenting 80 visual artists at work in their spaces, making whatever it was they did, whether it was outside on the street, painting murals, or inside sculpting or printmaking or painting. And it became an exhibition that showed at, I think, 6 locations.
Right.
The Bronx and White Plain, Westchester.
And then it became a book?
Then it became a book, because when an exhibition closes, it goes away. But if there's a book, it sticks around. So
and now there's a film, and so there was a showing. And tell us about the film, and then we're going to ask Dan as an artist what he thinks. But let's get the mechanics of it together.
Right. Well, the work of this thing happened in 2014, January to June. We had photographers.
So, I can't even believe it was that long ago. My goodness, time flies.
The photographers working, going all around the Bronx, shooting artists at work. And then we were contacted by the people who run Yes the Bronx, an organization that promotes all things good in the Bronx. And they said, we want to document what you're doing. It's an amazing project. And so they funded 2 really wonderful filmmakers who started following a couple of the photographers around as they documented artists at work. And so they created a 22-minute documentary film about this project that really encapsulated the energy of what was going on in the Bronx at that time, and also the energy of the project itself.
We're going to take a look at a clip from there, but Dan Hauben is frankly one of the most prolific artists and well-known artists in our borough of the Bronx. As an artist, what does this do for you? Because I know both of you are completely committed to the greatness of Bronx arts. But as an artist, when you have a photographer there, and now it's going to be the book and the movie, you know, that kind of thing. What does that do for you as an artist?
Well, there's several things on several levels. One, as I'm happen to be an artist that is not entirely happy working in isolation. I, have been painting on the streets of the Bronx. So I'm lucky that way. I have connection with those around who, people, the people on the streets or whatever, the man on the street. But also, the Bronx is challenging because of, being made up of many separate communities and not necessarily having a cultural center, or a downtown really. So, a part of my motivation in creating this project was to find the opportunity to connect artists with each other and to give everyone a greater sense of the cultural activity of our borough.
And so here are photographers who are artists, of course, in their own right, working with painters and other kinds of artists. So you've brought them together, and then of course, defining within one rather extraordinary volume, everybody together. I mean, that creates power.
It was power. It was, I think all of the artists who were photographed for this project felt honored by the presence of these, photographers who were devoting themselves to this objective. I really, certainly felt it myself. Adi Talwar was my photographer who turned out for the project, who turns out to be a photographer, of the highest.
I was going to say
caliber.
a Bronx photographer for the ages.
And he's become, a dear friend, and he's my designated photographer for all of my artwork now, and we've been doing projects since this time. So that was the legacy of this project for us, especially was friendships and connections, and that was the motivation, and certainly for us on a personal level it has endured.
It has done that. Let's show the little piece. We have about a minute clip. Talk to me, Judy, about Michael Camber, because he's seen in this clip. He, of course, the Bronx Documentary Center was instrumental in this program. So give us about a 20-second introduction, and then we're going to roll the clip.
Sure. Well, we couldn't have done it without Mike, and he opened the Bronx Documentary Center right around that time, around 2013. We had met him briefly at an event. He said, come on down. And then when the project evolved into a photography project, I was like, Danny, let's call that guy. Nice.
Who else? Yeah.
Let's see what he's got to say.
And he told us that they had just started what they called the Bronx Photo League. And there were a group of photographers wanting to do projects together. It just was right. The timing, he said, come on a Friday. 22 photographers came and we presented our idea. 20 of them signed on right then and there.
All right, so here it is, the film, the Bronx Artist. It's this.
Yeah, so the film is called Artistic Energy, the Bronx.
There you go, Bronx Artist Documentary Project, Artistic Energy, the Bronx. Let's take a look.
The guidelines that we gave the photographers were basically, we're interested in seeing that creation of artwork, showing their space and their environment. We wanted the real experience, real Bronx artists making important art and catching that creative moment.
This maybe? Yeah.
I think the first one.
You like this one?
Yeah.
This one with the...
When Mike came on board, it was understood that he would choose the photos. There were a few choices that we discussed, and we said, this one really doesn't show the artist's face. And for us, the idea is that the public should see what the visual artists look like, because you don't get to see visual artists. You get to see their work.
Okay, there it is. I'll give it a little applause. I guess this is the appropriate week to show it, considering that it was Oscar week. I don't know that it's Oscar award. Right. But here in the Bronx, listen, one of the things that I learned, and maybe Danny, you can really really embellish this. One of the things that I learned was, and I know many of the artists, as you know, the size of the artist community in this incredibly creative borough is frankly not to be believed. right?
And it's completely of another dimension now,
Ever since we finished the project.
Years later, well, there's been a great influx of artists from Brooklyn and other places that they're being priced out of or whatever. And then, with the awareness, while we were doing this, when we contacted the New York Times about covering this project, they said, well, they were planning to do an article about artists who have been in the Bronx for a year, 2 years or less. So we put them in touch with that segment of our project so that they were the ones that article was focused on. And of course, now it's, there's many more. There's
I'd be curious about that, given the pandemic, people have been home. Maybe they need more outlets for self-expression. Does either of you think, we'll start with Judy, does either of you think that this has been quietly and without publicity a prolific time for artists? We'll ask Judy first, and then we'll ask Danny if it affected him.
Well, that's an interesting question because, as you know, I've been known to be an artist in my own right, writer and composer. But for me, it has not been a prolific creative time.
Not been. Very interesting. And
Danny
so, Mr. Hauben, on the other hand, or is there no other hand?
Well, I kind of got the sense of the way things were going back, at the beginning of this pandemic, and I started working on a painting that was 3 foot square, and then it grew to 9 by 3 foot, and then it grew to 5.
As the pandemic raged on, the thing got bigger and bigger.
And that I've been focused on that painting, which is much more out of my imagination, and I believe
it ain't the Bronx.
Yeah, I believe is kind of also conveying some of what my experience has been. During this time.
Very difficult time. I'm going to make a suggestion, and I hadn't thought about this until we had this discussion. I'm always surrounded by Bronx books here. There's actually, I show these many, many more. These are all books by Bronx artists. I've got 2 more shelves. Right. I wonder, and many of these, in fact, just about all of them are people who've come on my television programs over the years. Maybe we should find, now there is a Bronx Literary Project. I mean, Charlie Vasquez runs that. I mean, we know that there's a lot going on, but maybe we ought to get some photographers out to our Bronx authors. I mean, these are just some of them. There's another shelf up here, all of Bronx books. Never stop creating here in our Bronx.
Well,
I'll borrow the Bronx.
And the BDC produces books of their exhibitions, right?
That's true. Bronx Documentary Center. Listen, there's no end to it. I know you guys are working on the ways that more people can see the film. Check out the website is
BronxArtist.project.org.
Right, BronxArtist.project.org.
And you can get the book there, or you can get it on Amazon.
Yep, you can get it anywhere, and
contact us directly also.
Let's continue to love and support Bronx art. We need it. We are it, and that's what we're doing.
Gary,
thank you, Gary.
You've been supporting things for I don't know how many decades.
Don't even ask. All right, we got to run. Judy Lane and Dan Hauben, thank you very much. That will do it for the Bronx Buzz this evening, and this week on Bronx Talk, a very, very important subject. We're going to talk about police reform and police tactics and what the heck is going on out here. I don't know how else to say it. Anyway, everybody stay well, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.
Thank you.